Good morning. Thank you so much for having me here to speak to Unity of Anchorage. I am grateful for that, grateful that you guys would join me. And the title of my talk is Who's Your Gatekeeper? So I start by asking, who is it that you're seeking to impress? Or who is it that you may be comparing yourself to? A little while back, I was asked to submit an article for one of Unity's upcoming booklets dealing with the Lent, and I was asked to cover the topic of competitiveness. And that's what prompted me to create this talk, because most of us, we swim in a culture where we are inundated by messages of comparison and competition. Often we're, without even really realizing it's happening, we're encouraged to compare ourselves to and feel lesser than, so that we'll buy some product to make ourselves feel better about ourselves or our lives. And many of us also sort of had heaven's gatekeeper rules given us from previous religious experience and religious teachings. And I was raised in a pretty darn heavy-handed, fear-based Southern Baptist style of Christianity. And it was a very disempowering set of teachings and beliefs. And a little while back, I was teaching a world religions class, and we were looking at what do the world's major faiths recognize in one another or not recognize in one another. And the Jewish faith doesn't recognize Jesus as Messiah, and Protestants don't recognize the Pope as the overall spiritual leader. Southern Baptists, we don't recognize each other in the liquor store. One of the things I love about Unity is you can tell jokes like that in a Sunday message. So I feel like I can get away with it since I have that Southern Baptist background myself. In all seriousness, though, this culture of comparison and competition, a lot of that gets started in our earliest programming by the people who raise us, and I think we're all born perfect, and then our parents get a hold of us, and they're all dealing with their own programming. And I'll tell you a little story about what this can lead to. So I had a total knee replacement about a year and a half ago, and I'm a little bit young for that. But the reason that all came about is because when I was 21, a friend of mine, her mother had a young paint horse that they were having big problems with getting it started to ride. Several trainers had already sent it back. And I was quite the little daredevil cowgirl, which is why I've got so much hardware in my body now. But anyway, this friend asked if I would help her mom and see if I could get this horse to, accept a rider. And I was really afraid. I didn't feel good about it. I didn't want to do it. But I forced myself through, and the horse blew up, threw itself on the ground, got me with a leg, and literally put my knee to the ground sideways and backwards. It was a life-changing experience. And I didn't realize it at the time, but it wasn't because I'm super courageous that happened. It was because even though I was very estranged at that time from my father, he was still running my show. And I could hear somewhere in my programming, my dad was saying, you got to be tough. You got to push through. You can't back down. And I was responding to that because I hadn't yet become aware enough of my gatekeepers. I am now finding that there is tremendous and sometimes humbling power in becoming more and more aware of who and what those gatekeepers are, and learning to clear space on the altars of our minds, to clear out that programming so that new insights, new perspective, and even new identities can flow in. Because I believe we continue to evolve identity throughout the entire course of this wild human part of our journey. So I invite you to take a moment right now and just consider, are there places where comparison or competition are playing out in your own lives. A friend of mine who I wouldn't really have thought of as being a particularly deep person, but he offered me up this little jewel recently where he pointed out that in his opinion, all of our angst and dis-ease comes from one of three things, or a combination of three things: regret about the past, fear or worry about the future, and comparing ourselves to others. And when I really think about it, I think he's really onto something with that. I believe it was Theodore Roosevelt who wrote that comparison is the thief of joy. And I would also say comparison can be the thief of creativity, because when we're too concerned about how our talents, our gifts to the world compare to others, we start checking and limiting and maybe reshaping what we have to offer, which can erode some of the actual unique authenticity that each one of us does have to bring into this world. I find it interesting that one of the dictionary definitions, I want to read this for you. One of the dictionary definitions of competitiveness is, quote, possessing a strong desire to be more successful than others. That is at its base a scarcity-based approach. It is suggesting that in order for us to be good enough, we have to feel we're better than someone else. It also suggests that there's not enough good enough for everybody. In contrast to that, unity is a prosperity-based way of thinking. It knows that we are so much more than comparison and competition, that we have our own unique gifts and talents, as that wonderful Karen Drucker song said at the beginning of this service, to offer. We are each beautiful, unique, and divine in our own right. I have discovered, I think this topic resonates with me. They say you wind up teaching what you most need to learn. I was raised with a lot of competition and I was pretty good at it. And it has taken so far 5+ decades to really, really unravel a lot of that. And I have learned that a tremendous prosperity practice is really genuinely celebrating another person's successes, another person's accomplishments, and another person's talents and what they have to offer, even if, and especially if, those talents are ones that we sort of wish we had, right? When we celebrate that in someone else, that brings a certain level of prosperity into our own lives. Learning that their star shining doesn't dim our own, brightens the light in our entire world. I fully and wholeheartedly believe that. I want to read a couple excerpts. I'm going to start with Myrtle Fillmore, and I'm going to read, this is from her Healing Letters, just a little paragraph or two. In my version, it's page 137. And she's writing here, remember and be encouraged, dear, that when we begin to awaken and to feel the urge to minister, when we began to, she's talking of the history of Unity getting started. She says, remember that when we began to awaken and to feel the urge to minister, there was no such thing as a Unity center, not even friends who saw things we did. We did come in touch with a few and were together in a class, but we all had to branch out and start using what we got in our own way, meeting whatever need presented itself. It was the thing that shone in our face and the results we got through our prayers that drew others to us. And we hadn't time to think much about what success we were having. There was so much to be done for the family, and our own eager study of whatever words of truth we could find or hear kept us busy. We were not thinking of the approval of others or how they regarded us, and not depending on any gathering or other folks' cooperation. We were perfectly free to do whatever work the Father brought. We didn't ask for work, it just came right to our home. Someone would hear through another that we were onto something good and would come. So no comparison, no time for comparison. That's a prosperity consciousness demonstrated. The second one I want to read is also from Myrtle, from How to Let God Help You. And it's on page 146. So get busy by using the truth you know. Love those about you in a practical way. Pay no attention to what others are doing insofar as to make comparisons. Bring forth your own joyous world of love, friendship, beauty, and plenty. God is giving everything required to build such a world. There is within you the God-given intelligence to build such a world. Get at it. She says, her words. I would have loved to have met her, actually. You know, in other words, I think when we are competing, when we're competing against, we're in a mindset that's undermining our own times and talents. A course in Miracles is one of my main spiritual squeezes, and I want to read an excerpt from it. And for anyone who knows the course, and this sounds a little off, this is an exact quote, except I change all the language in the course to be gender neutral. I don't believe God is a he, and I don't believe it's helpful to have all divinity referred to as a he. So that's the only difference you'll get here, but I'm going to read this. Quote, because God's equal children, creations, have everything, they cannot compete. And that's in capitals in the Course in Miracles, cannot. They cannot compete. But if they perceive any of their brothers, sisters as anything other than their perfect equals, the idea of competition has entered their minds. Do not underestimate the need to be vigilant against this idea, because all your conflicts come from it. So basically, the course right there is saying, be vigilant against the idea, in caps, of competition, because all of our conflicts come from it. In addition to the people in our lives that we may be trying to access or impress or outcompete, as I mentioned earlier, we're also swimming in cultural programming that feeds us that message and that norm all the time. There are billions of dollars spent trying to get us to compare ourselves to others. And the crazy thing about it is a lot of the things, the stories and the images we may be comparing ourselves to are airbrushed. They're not even real, but that is the culture that we swim through. We're in a culture that increasingly ignores the truth and tries to sell us something based on a version of what we ought to do or be that will put profits in other folks' pockets. That's important, I think, to just be really aware of that, because that's a very, very powerful gatekeeper in our consciousness if we're not aware of it. That is actually a form of colonizing our minds. And part of our work as spiritually awakening beings is to take it back, to decolonize from that unhealthy and disempowering programming, because that, in my not so humble opinion on this, that is a completely unworthy gatekeeper for minds as fabulous as ours, right? It's unworthy. About, I would say 6 months ago, I was in, quote, competition for a consulting contract that I really, really wanted. I really loved this organization. It was a whole well-being economy organization that I have high praise for. I was down to one of the final 2 candidates, and I really thought that I was going to get this position. I felt really good about it, and I honestly wanted it more than any work position I'd wanted in a long time, and I didn't get it. And I was so disappointed. I was on the verge of tears, which is pretty darn unusual for me. And I wallowed around in it for about 24 hours. And what I noted was it actually rattled my confidence, and it got me questioning things like, wow, I'm 55 and I'm white. And right now in the environment and economic system change movement, there's a lot of intentionality about increasing people of color and diversity and all of that. And I totally support that and get that. But I went to the place of, wow, does that mean I'm kind of going to be excluded now? And I'm well into middle age now. And have I missed my window in my career? And I realized that kind of self-doubt and that kind of attachment meant that I had put that one client and that one position into a gatekeeper role. And when they didn't open the gate to me, I went into a feeling of lesser than. That's what being unaware of where we're draining power can get to. Now I pulled on, I said I wallowed for a day. And then I pulled on all of our tools. I pulled on our new thought teaching, our unity teaching, which this is all mind training. That would have been a term that would have scared me before. I think now it's just brilliant. I'm so grateful that I've come into it. I pulled on those tools and took my mind back. And I realized, okay, that door didn't open. What is it that I really wanted? Why was I so attached to that? What did I want to get from it? And how can I be offering some of those gifts and those things that I thought would come with that position from the platforms that I already have in place? I spent some time assessing that, tweaking a few of my own platforms. As it turned out, a little while later, that organization offered me a different role, and looking back, had I taken the one I thought I wanted, I would not have had the bandwidth to really be developing my own ministry, which is important to me as now finally on the other end of the educational process and fully into the doing of ministry. I probably wouldn't have even had the time to be here talking with you guys today. So I offer, it's subtle. I find that this competition and comparison piece is very subtle. And I want to read you a quote this is Charles Fillmore from his book, Prosperity. It's about a paragraph. Quote, "There is a great similarity in the homes of nearly all people who have about the same sized incomes. Each one unconsciously follows suggestion and furnishes his home with the same sort of things as his neighbors. Here and there are exceptions. Someone is expressing his or her individuality, overcoming mass suggestion, and buying the kind of furniture he or she really wants, or that is really comfortable and useful. This free, independent spirit has much in its favor in making a prosperity demonstration. The delusion that it is necessary to be just like other people or to have as much as other people have causes a spirit of anxiety and hinders the exercise of faith in demonstration." It's one of our founders. I think that's powerful. Another aspect to this concept of gatekeeper and comparison is the idea and the demonstration, I would say, of non-conformity, feeling a little different, feeling a little maladjusted to our society. And I have experienced that a lot of people in Unity and New Thought feel that feeling. We don't feel completely like maybe we're of this world. We're in it, but maybe not of it. I say hallelujah. I want to read a quote from Martin Luther King, very short. He says, "But I must honestly say there are some things in our nation and the world to which I am proud to be maladjusted, and wish all men of goodwill would be maladjusted until the good society is realized." Jesus was another fantastic example of someone who didn't fit in very well, who was maladjusted to that time and to that society. And people, in order, I'm a world changer. I'm a system changer. I do want us to create a world that works better for all beings. And in order for society to change in a positive way, it has to have people who are not just going to roll along with the norms that are not actually happy. If you feel maladjusted, I say hallelujah. Go out there and demonstrate that. That's what we need right now, I believe, in our world. I mentioned that the competition, at least for me, the competition and comparison piece is very subtle. So do you ever have that feeling, like with your spouse or your partner, when your way works out a little better than their way? Or you have that little tiny little twinge, if you're perfectly honest, of glee when some celebrity who maybe doesn't seem to be the nicest person has their fall from grace? Or do you ever find yourself thinking about another person's challenges or problems and kind of going tisk tisk because you know that the choices they've made are, not as good as your choices? I would say tisk tisking is always a sign that we are in some sort of comparison. Some sort of comparison. I recently I have a lot of experience with the tisking side of things with certain family members that I've been in positions of responsibility with. Very, very challenged young people who had a tremendously challenging upbringing. And I have learned that a beautiful insight into a form of grace is actually the ability to hold an image and the possibility of someone as empowered, powerful spiritual beings, even when they're demonstrating in life something other than that. Just holding the space of that possibility for them is an active form of grace. And it is definitely preferable to the tisking approach all the way around. I feel it's important to share, I think there's a real difference between competition and striving. Striving to get better, to become more empowered, more peaceful, even better at a sport or a craft. That I believe is a helpful and good thing. And one of the paradoxes that come with that, I think, for many of us in Unity and New Thought is being able to sit in the space of, I am perfectly whole and complete and a powerful spiritual being as I am right now, and I can be even better. That, I think, is striving in a healthful, non-competitive, that striving for something is different from competing against someone or something. Another piece to this is one of the other pieces of cultural stew that most of us swim through is the notion of hard work and the need to work hard to get things. And we work at our spiritual practices. And as Nancy said earlier, we're working at technology. That is just common, normal language. I have been a workaholic, hands down, true story. I have those tendencies. I'm now trying to drop that language from my vocabulary quite a bit and say that I'm playing at it. And I will tell you, I have a wonderful teacher in this. One of my big current addictions is competitive dog agility. And if you don't know what that is, it's an actual sport and it's an obstacle course, and the dog runs over jumps and does teeter-totters and weaves through weave poles, and the handler is giving them direction through it. It is just wildly fun for me. Who knew that I would have at mid-50s found something that I feel like a little kid about and I'm addicted to. It's so fun. But my little 2-year-old border collie, Olive, if I made that a job for her, if I made that work, she would not want to do it. And dogs are too smart to just let us work them to death, right? They're like, so we play agility. We don't go do agility. We don't go work at agility obstacles. We go play agility. And I'm trying to really add that into my own striving. I'm going to go play at my writing today. I'm going to play at giving this talk to you all. I just offer it up out there. It lightens the workload I'm finding, makes the striving more fun, and I would suggest more effective. As powerful spiritual beings, as I get ready to wrap this up, I just want to remind everyone that as powerful spiritual beings, we already have the solution to every problem that we may be grappling with. Our loved ones have solutions to the problems they may be grappling with. We have every bit of access to deep truth already within us. The key is to remembering it. The key is to remembering what we really truly are. Each of you are incomparable. You cannot be compared to others because you are absolutely unique, glorious, individual expressions of creation. And I would hope if any inspiration comes from this talk at all, it would be to bolster your intention to not allow yourself to be diminished by comparison or competition, but just to shine your light as brightly as you can and as daringly as you desire, because the more each and every one of us do, the brighter and better our world will be. Namaste.